business and sponsor your business with Vietnam. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Hi, everybody. I am Stephanie Kalota. I was and had a veteran legislative voice, and I have recently relaunched it to the Political Veteran. It's now re-identified as a blog, and so that everybody can understand and find all the information that you need for military and veteran issues in public policy. Trying to make it a little bit more inclusive, not just legislative things, and having a really good identity as a blog and a source of information for everybody is what I'm hoping that it could launch into and everybody can enjoy. So you can also find me at the Political Veteran now. I just renamed it on the social media. So those that were followers, you're still followers, so you're good. And then you can look it up, The Political Veteran, on Facebook and Instagram, X, Threads, and I believe now Blue Sky as well, although I'm still building that one up. My website is also live. There's a few things that are still in construction, but my website's live, and it's thepoliticalveteran.com. Very quick and simple, so that way you guys can find all the information you need. So today we're going to be talking about presidential candidate Donald Trump had promised that he would be using the military for the mass deportation plan that he has been talking about for months. So he wants to deport those that he identify as illegal immigrants, and also deport them outside of the country. And originally he had said that he would use the local law enforcement, because right now there isn't enough ICE agents or any other agents federally to use this. Local law enforcement have said that they don't have enough people to do that as well, because they're already stretched thin. So that led presidential candidate Trump to say that he will use the military instead. So let's talk about that. Well, this could be in breach of a law from 1878 called the Posse Comitatus Act. Apologize if I say it wrong. You can correct me. It's fine. I don't mind. Just let me know what the correct pronunciation is, because I already have a speech impediment, so I'll probably be using that. So this law limits the powers of the federal government in the use of federal military personnel to enforce domestic policies within the United States. Congress passed this act as an amendment to the Army Appropriation Bill at the end of the Reconstruction period. And then it was updated multiple times, 1956, 1981, and 2021. So originally, this law only applied to the military. And then further updates included the rest of the services except for the Guard and Coast Guard, National Guard, and the Coast Guard. That's because of Representative Adam Schiff, who President Trump does dislike very much and calls his name out a lot. He introduced the amendment, and it was included in a 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. I do talk about those a lot. That's usually a very mass funding bill. And if that bill doesn't pass and there's no continuing resolution, the government shut down. So NDAA is a big thing that I do tend to talk about a lot. But there is often a whole lot of amendments that's included in that giant bill. It's usually one of the largest bills that are passed. And I will say not many other bills are that long. Usually a few pages, some just a page. A lot of them are just a page long. So don't be discouraged when I tell you that this one is very large. It's an outlier. It's one of those things that they have to do every year. And it's okay. We can help you break it down so you can understand these very long bills. So this law is also applicable to anyone within the United States, not just citizens. So you can't use the military as civil law enforcement within the United States. This act has been amended to include a few allowances, like the one in 1981 that I mentioned. It's to use the military really for when they were using the war on drugs. Congress enacted this legislation so that the military can cooperate with civil law enforcement when it came to the war on drugs. In that instance, the military collects information and uses military equipment to track drug lawbreakers. I mean, makes a whole lot of sense, right? So that way they can keep all of that intelligence and observing and use it for a little bit more good than just defense. Well, that's my cat baby. So, and then you may ask, well, what else can be, what's going on with this one? Especially with Texas and the Guard being there. Well, the Guard is exempt, but National Guard members are also just part of the support operations for the border operations in Texas. That's all they've really been doing, trying to make sure that those agents that are working the border, they get enough support that they need. A lot of people don't realize how much logistics is involved. I'm a logistician by trade and by training. Used to teach the course. And so there is a ton of things that you have to track: feeding, lodging, transportation, equipment, many, many things, paperwork. Just making sure that your office has enough paper is a logistician's job. Yeah, that's all it is. So making sure that those things are done, that's what the National Guard's been doing in Texas. So this is not the first time that President Trump wanted to use the military for domestic purposes. He attempted to use them during the George Floyd protests. He did use the Guard, especially the DC Guard, which actually is the only Guard that reports directly to the president. He did use them for the protests that did happen in 2020. And he did try to get states involved to get the Guard activated to go pretty much for the protests and counter the protests. Whew. And then what was the other one he did divert. So back to the border. He did divert $10 billion of the military's budget to the border wall. So that's definitely money that the military does need, and that we often have to beg for money, usually for just the housing, just to make sure that the housing on bases for the families are there and safe for everyone. Equipment that we need, maintenance that we need. I know very many Army Reserve units at the time during President Trump's administration, we had issues with trying to get the maintenance done on our tracked vehicles because there wasn't much funding, there wasn't enough people to do it, there wasn't much availability for the maintenance to be done. So yeah, there's a lot of things that the military can do with that $10 billion. The American Immigration Council estimates that this could cost up to $88 billion a year, which is actually 10 times more than the ICE's budget and almost $1 trillion over a 10-year time frame. This budget will include more ICE agents. Trump stated that he wanted to hire 10,000 more new agents. ICE currently has 20,000 personnel, so that's half added. So that would be a lot of infrastructure to build for their locations, for the management. That would be an interesting event to try to manage. And to follow through with this plan, there will have to be mass amount of logistics, like I said, for about the border. And this is what I mean: facilities to hold those that are arrested or detained, training for those that are going to be doing the arresting, and then honestly, those that are there in the prisons to be the prison guards, basically. That needs training. There's a bunch of things that needs to be involved here. For instance, all people within the United States, not just citizens, have the right to the Miranda rights. And just not saying the Miranda rights correctly or at all can throw an entire case because of the evidence or whatever that they find and what have you. So that can cause a judicial nightmare. So training is very important to make sure that these things go smoothly, the operations go smoothly, so then they can actually accomplish their mission. So, and then they also need equipment. They also need vehicles. They're going to need to be transporting people. And if President Trump decides he wants to use the military to be the ones to be doing the arresting, the pickup, what have you, he's going to have to pay for their transportation. Military is not everywhere within the United States. They're only in clusters around the United States. You can try to use the National Guard and Reserve, but that will can cause a lot of issues because you can't call them in within a certain time frame. You have to train them. There are not enough military police people in the United States military to support this deportation plan, including those, because there are actually guards, MOSs in the military. I've known a few units that did that and served in Gitmo. So there's not enough of them. So they're going to have to cross-train. And that happens a lot in the military, I will say that. And the problem with that is that they're not as intensely trained. They don't have the motivation or morale towards it because they are being forced to do things that they didn't select to do or want to do. I know many people may say tough, but it does impact the quality of work that you receive, that you get out of these people. So it can cause a lot of different issues. We had, at one of the bases I was at in Kuwait, we actually had the guards that were pretty much making sure that the security of these bases were safe. They were actually mechanics and truck drivers. And they were cross-trained to do the security and of the bases instead. And there was a lot of issues with those people. That unit had a lot of problems. Morale was one of the base issues, and then it just kind of blew up from there. And so I could say from experience, cross-training might not be the best option because of the quality that you get out of the unit that you receive, that you try to cross-train. Then when you have to use the military, and then probably use them in places where you don't they're not locally near, you will have to pay for the transportation, which means the lodging, the food, the gas. If they use their own vehicles, they've got to do the paperwork, which can cause some stuff. What's other things? Oh, if they got to use rental cars, flying, all of that stuff has to be paid. And it can cost a lot. I used to be a travel approver for DTS, so it can cost a lot, especially if things are last minute. And I can tell you for sure, when I worked for the Trump under the Trump administration in the Army Reserve, we did a lot of things last minute. And a trip that would probably normally cost between $600 to $900 would cost up to $3,000 because we had to do it last minute. Yeah, so that stuff does happen, and it can cause a lot of issues. So. Let's get to the judicial part, because I did mention that a little bit. I know I mentioned this is not military specifically, but we got to know a little bit of more things of what's going on so that we can understand what's really encompassing the military in with this as well, because this may cause a long-standing issue. They may go and arrest a whole lot of people, detain them in a location, and then pretty much make sure that these people are guarded. And then they may sit in the judicial system because there might be some sort of court action or what have you. So this is why I mention it, that it can cause some issues because then they're already detained. They got to keep guarding them. Military will be stuck there, and a lot of morale can drop dramatically by doing these things. So the different types of deportation, some of them do not require an order from a court. Those are expedited removal. In these cases, a non-citizen can be deported without a court hearing through a process called expedited removal. This can happen if a non-citizen was apprehended at the border within 14 days of entry, came into the United States without proper travel documents. That can count for probably what President Trump might be using for these illegals. So then they can also qualify if they used forged travel documents and does not comply with their visa or other entry document requirements. Another one is reinstatement of removal. And these are the people that were previously deported and can be subject to rapid reinstatement of the removal if they cross the border again. So if they're already deported for some reason and then they didn't come back into this country the legal way, that's an automatic deportation. So that might be a qualifier there for many of the people that may be arrested. The other one is Title 42. And that's when the Centers for Disease Control can expel migrants without even issuing a deportation order under Title 42. This was enacted during COVID. I know President Biden did extend it for a time frame because there was a restricted time frame that President Trump had got instituted, and then President Biden extended it, and then they were able to take it back. I was trying to find a better word for it. So we'll see how that one goes. I don't think that one might be used unless we do get another pandemic. So we'll see. So if Trump wants to use or skip the court system, which can take forever because they're not very well manned and maintained. And that's one of the things that the border enforcement and the immigration bill that Trump made sure died. He wanted that actually had more money to add more courts, add more people to do the paperwork, speed up the court process. So it's already pretty slow. So he'll have to find a way to make sure that those arrested fall into the above requirements or try to change the law. He may be able to do this with Republican control of the House and Senate. But some laws require 60%, and the Republican Party doesn't have either in either chamber, doesn't have 60% in either chamber. So yeah, that can be tough. I really don't want to go through all the legals of what would require the 60% or not, because it can be confusing. So that can be for another time frame. I did look up on what other organizations have said in response, and one that I have found is from the American Civil Liberties Union, and this came from Anthony Romero, the executive director. He said, "We are crystal clear that the next Trump administration will do everything in its power to make mass deportation raids a reality. As we ready litigation and create firewalls for freedom across blue states, we must also sound the alarm that what's on the horizon will change the very nature of life for tens of millions of Americans. President-elect Trump will soon have the full power of the U.S. government machinery at his disposal to target and displace immigrants at a scale our nation has never experienced." He made that remark 2 days ago on November 18th. There is a possibility that Trump could use the military for just support services when it comes to the deportation plan. Logistics, transporting, things like that, like I mentioned. Even with that, I would be disconcerted as a leader in the military if I was in today. Many service members are immigrants themselves. Many have family members that were undocumented or illegal under President-elect Trump's terms. Currently, there's about 45,000 immigrants that serve in the military today, and about 5,000 green card holders or permanent residents enlist every year. This pretty steady number every year so that might cause an issue. Since 2002, more than 187,000 members of the U.S. military has been naturalized. That's about the size of the Army Reserve. I'm sorry, I know that number, but yes, it is about the size of the Army Reserve. That is a lot. So this mass deportation can cause recruitment and morale issues. If you can imagine your troops having to arrest and separate families of their own ethnicity or people that they actually know in their families or in the neighborhood, that's the one thing that can be really difficult, because there are veterans that are deported as well. So are they going to be part of this as well? That can be causing a big issue that we'll have to see. And that would be a lovely question for me to ask D. James later, and we can talk about that at another time. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to this mass deportation plan that can cause a lot of issues. Oh goodness, I lost it. The Immigration Council, they have actually said, they actually had a report and stating that it can cause actual other issues for the United States economy when these people are deported, because they do support a lot of work that, I mean, they're undocumented, they are paid under the table, but it's a lot of work that a lot of Americans don't actually do. Farming, meat processing. There's a lot of things that they don't do that do end up reflecting and really just going down the system and affecting everyone. So when we have a loss of labor like that, we can actually cause an issue of inflation, an increase. When there's less product but higher demand, the price is going to go up. When there's lower demand and a lot of product, the price goes down. It's just how economy works, supply and demand. So we'll see how that one goes. It can cost the military more money because, you know what, they're buying the gas, they're buying the fuel, they're buying the food, a lot of things out there that can cost the military more money. And if we have to continue with continuing resolutions, which is mostly just an agreement from the previous time period that they have, it's not going to include the inflation that may have started in the next in the next time period that happened over the last time that it was approved. New projects will not be approved and delayed, which can cause more issues, because that can also, those estimates would be invalid. So they would have to do the estimates again and then start the process again. And then it would just be a lot of mess. So it's a lot for us to try to absorb and understand and see how this is going to affect everybody, including the military. One of the other things that I think about is also our veterans, because if the Guard and Reserve are activated, given the Guard's activated and the states activate them, those Guard members don't receive any VA disability for the time frame that they were activated if they were injured. If they were federalized and pretty much if they get injured, it will be covered on VA disability. And it can affect their careers if they get injured and they can't serve anymore while they're injured. Accidents happen, injuries happen, and in every case, I mean, there was a soldier that actually passed away from his injuries when he was at the floating pier off the coast of Gaza. Injuries do happen. I've served in some pretty hazardous workplaces that still are in green zones. So people can have injuries, people can get sick. There are toxic exposures that can happen. Fuel, PFAS, lots of other things that can happen that can cause issues with our service members that will then reflect to the VA disability. Because that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize when we talk about war or we talk about military operations. We fail to talk about the costs of war after the war is over. And that would have to be taking care of the veteran after the war and after their service. And that's when a lot of people forget what we also have to do for our veterans to ensure that they get what they deserve, which is all of our support. So please keep that mindful. Talk with everybody. See how you guys are going with how you feeling about this. If you guys do have any issues with this, I do recommend you guys contact different organizations that may help. Repatriate Our Patriots with D. James is a great location to start. ACLU, other locations, they can help if you have any concerns about this. And for morale, report what's going on. Always report. Don't worry about those about getting in trouble. I know whistleblowing is a very complicated issue, but it can save a life if you report what's going on, because that low morale can cause a lot of issues. PTSD can be developed by low morale, toxic work environments. And I mean mentally and emotionally, not just physically. So you guys keep that in mind. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time. And check out the politicalveteran.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Blue Sky, and working on getting my blogs out and more posts out. And I can't wait for you guys to see how everything goes. And you guys have a great week. Thank you.